Ready to proceed?
We are.
All right, thank you. We are back on the record in 21 CR 2296, People of the State of Colorado versus Stacy Rodriguez. The parties are present as previously captioned. We come on for sentencing after the verdicts of the jury. Mr. Pralia, before you begin your sentencing argument, are there any statements that the state wishes to present for the court's consideration?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. Why don't you go ahead and proceed prior to your sentencing argument?
Mr. Alan Dickerson wishes to make a statement.
All right, thank you. Mr. Dickerson, will you please come to the podium, sir? And Mr. Dickerson, before you again, will you please state your full name and spell your last name for the record? And then I'm happy to consider anything that you'd like to tell me.
My name is Alan Charles Dickerson, Dickerson. I'm Christopher's father. And this time, I would like to set the record straight about Christopher and the character of that young man. Christopher was a loving and giving child. He overcame many difficulties growing up. When he was 10, he had a bad accident on a bike and broke both wrists. He overcame that and was able to purchase a dirt bike and continue to enjoy the outdoors, riding dirt bikes with his friends. He was always interested in tinkering with things. He was a kind and generous young man. He was friendly to all he met. He was an extrovert in nature. He never saw anything bad in the people that he met, although he was able to overlook other people's troubles and be giving and generous. One time when he was going to school in Laramie, Wyoming, we were buying a meal for Chris, and he purchased a meal for someone that was having extreme difficulty that most of us would just overlook, but not Chris, because his character was giving and generous. He bought that man a meal. He saw him in need. Chris achieved his dream of getting a higher education. He graduated Wildtech in Laramie, Wyoming with a degree in diesel mechanics and a bachelor's degree, an associate degree in business administration. Christopher got his first break when he interviewed for Noosa Yogurt. He was a shift manager for Noosa Yogurt. And I'd like to set the record straight. Chris did have difficulty at Noosa at the last 30 days because he was a whistleblower. Chris was a stand-up individual, and when Noosa was going through a buyout from Sosa Brands, he would not go along with management, even at the risk of losing his job. Chris stood up for a contractor that was a snow removal contractor for them, and he eventually lost his job because of that retaliation. He was a whistleblower. Chris did not deserve to die that day when he befriended those two young women. Chris deserved so much more in his life. He had overcome so much more in his life. He overcame more than most people would be able to accomplish. I was very proud of him. He had his difficulties as a young man. He suffered addictions. He overcame them. And as he was growing and learning about how to become a better man, to help himself achieve a better life, he was able to accomplish his dreams. He bought a home. he saved. He lived with us for at least 3 years while he was saving for a home. He had a serious relationship with a young woman, and it didn't work out. That was a hardship for him. But he had a loving companion in his dog, Juna, and he adored her, and she adored him. We now have Juna, and it's the only thing we have left of Christopher to remember him by. All his earthly possessions were consumed in a fire meant to conceal a horrible death inflicted on him by 2 individuals. Again, Chris did not deserve the outcome that he received. He did not deserve to have his body mutilated, moved, tampered with. He did not deserve to leave nothing for his family and friends to remember him by. All his childhood mementos gone. I ask this court to do justice today for Christopher and his family and his friends and the community at large that were put at risk by the arson to conceal a horrible death of a loving, giving young man. I ask for the maximum sentence allowed by law. This person has victimized us again over this last 2.5 weeks by dragging us through a painful accounting that is totally based in fiction. I ask for the jury to not let this person hurt or harm any other person or family. That's what I have to say.
All right, thank you, Mr. Dickerson. I appreciate your presence throughout this process. Mr. Pralia, does the state have any additional witness statements for the court's consideration?
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Hi,
Thank you.
my name is Ann Dickerson, and I'm Christopher's mother.
And ma'am, I'm so sorry. Can you speak up just a little bit? I think I heard you say that you were Ann Dickerson and that you were Christopher's mother. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Yes. Thank you all for your time. Thank you for this chance to talk about Christopher. It is so good to hear people saying his name and speaking of him well. When we lost Chris, I didn't feel that I could bear it, that things could go on. He was our firstborn. He was his brother's only sibling. He was blessed with a good sense of humor, an adventurous kind of curiosity, and good nature and generosity. He did struggle. He did struggle, but he didn't give up, and there were people who helped him not give up, and I want to thank them, including his brother Matthew, my family, Ellen's family, our friends, his teachers, his counselors, the people that he ran into in the courts, in the system, in his friends. He just never gave up trying to make it better for all of us. I just want to thank you. We have been so fortunate to have a team of people that are shielding and protecting Christopher when we can't and when he can't. I am just so grateful. I can't tell you how grateful I am that his name was spoken and spoken of well. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Dickerson. I appreciate you being here today. Mr. Prelia, does the state have any other witness statements that they wish to present?
No, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. From the state, any sentencing argument, please go ahead.
Justice delayed is not justice denied. This court has seen this family in this courtroom at nearly every appearance since this occurred. As of today, that is 1,257 days. 3 years, 5 months, and 10 days of them coming to court and hearing about this horrific death. And I can't imagine what that's like for a family. I can't imagine what that's like as a parent to have what has happened to them from the very outset. That on October 3rd, that the Weld County coroner comes to your door asking where your son goes to the dentist so they can help identify a body that was found in his house. And there needs to be some recognition of how we get to where we're at today. And the first person that deserves recognition is Detective Jerry Burroughs. Because after that tragedy struck, he sacrificed his own family and everything else in order to provide this closure today for that family. Without sleeping, to investigate, to come up with who did these horrific crimes. And it morphed from simply an arson to a first-degree murder the minute that autopsy took place. And he did everything for them, and he should be applauded for that, along with other members of the Greeley Police Department and their investigative work. And that was all because these two individuals did nothing to help, did nothing to care about Chris, the person, who he was, or anything about him. They cared about themselves. And then I would submit you've watched it on November 11th, based on all of that hard investigative work. You saw the arrests on the body-worn camera, and it was obvious right then, to me and anyone else in law enforcement or the jury, who did what. I can say personally, I never doubted once who took Chris's life. In large part, that's why we agreed to a proffer with Hosanna Varela. There was never a doubt that this defendant took his life because of her violent and antisocial character, her behavior. And candidly, Judge, I never entertained any possibility of a plea in this case. And the reasoning was simple, that I couldn't have any confidence that she would not kill again and put another victim's family in the position that the Dickersons are today. I don't know what the court's been able to view or not. I know you have a very difficult job during trial. But this entire process has seemed like a game to her. She jokes, she laughs, she demeans the victim in the very setting where she stabbed him, and she's going through a trial for it. Her true character and true actions throughout this process, throughout this case, throughout her notes, are diabolical and despicable. She is a threat to society, and there is no place for her in it. For the Dickersons, I hope this verdict brings some peace, maybe some closure in this journey, provides some help with the grief, hopefully some healing. I just want to say I appreciate their constant motivational factors for us and this team, which should include Lily Parker, who worked countless hours on this case as well from my office. And them just coming gave us the strength to keep going in these 3.5 years. I'm asking the court to provide the only sentence that you can as to murder in the first degree, life without the possibility of parole, with consecutive sentences on each of the other counts that this jury found. They saw her true character. They saw her true actions. Your sentence should reflect that. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Ms. Devereaux, Ms. Trujillo, prior to any sentencing argument, does the defense have any witness statements they wish to present to the court?
No, and we're not making any statements at this time.
All right, thank you. And Ms. Devereaux, I assume the answer is the same for Ms. Rodriguez, but for the record, I'm just going to inquire with her briefly. Do you need a moment to speak with her before I do?
Just a moment, thank you.
All right, thank you. Ms. Rodriguez, is there anything that you would like to tell me before I impose sentence in this case? You certainly don't have to if you don't want to.
No, thank you.
All right, thank you. All right. Ms. Rodriguez, as to count one, the only sentence that the law provides for is life in prison without the possibility of parole. Under the circumstances of this case, that is the only sentence the court legally can provide. It's also the only sentence the court can provide if there is to be any sense of justice out of these proceedings. Ms. Rodriguez, your actions were horrible. Your decisions were horrible, both in the commission of this act and the choices that you made after this act. It is a struggle for this court to understand how you can go from meeting a person to viciously stabbing them in the neck until they are dead in the course of a few hours. It's one of the most disturbing cases that I think has been before this court since I've had this job. Because everything that I've heard about Mr. Dickerson indicates that he is blameless in this whole scenario. The man that I saw on the surveillance video in downtown Greeley didn't appear to me to be a creepy man, a disturbed man, a dangerous man. If anything, he seemed to me to be a slightly lonely man. Just at the bars, attempting to make some contact with other people that evening. One of the hardest things about my job is that I am forced to meet wonderful and caring parents like Mr. and Ms. Dickerson in the back of the courtroom under just the most tragic circumstances that they've unfortunately had to go through in their lives. It is the loss of a life under any circumstances and tragic, but when parents have to bury a child, even if that child is grown, Mr. Dickerson and Ms. Dickerson, I can't even imagine the pain that you have gone through. And I wanted to say to both of you, I very much appreciate the respectful way that you have carried yourself throughout the course of these years as this case has progressed. I don't know that very many people would have the capacity to carry themselves in such a respectful way under such horrible circumstances, but I am very much appreciative for the participation that you've shown throughout this process and your willingness to be here every day to ensure that your son's memory is not forgotten by anyone and that your loss is not forgotten by anyone. Ms. Rodriguez, there's nothing that I can say about this act that in any way paints it in any sort of justifiable or excusable light. There's no context to this matter that makes it less horrible. So as I've stated, the sentence in this matter is just, it is deserved, it is necessary, and it is appropriate under these circumstances. Ms. Rodriguez, what I need you to consider is what you do tomorrow, what you do a year from now, and what you do 10 years from now, and what you do the rest of your life. Ms. Rodriguez, you're going to spend the rest of your natural life in the Department of Corrections, but you will still be alive. And Ms. Rodriguez, you're very young. I would imagine that the person that you are 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 30 years from now, probably has a very different perspective on the actions that caused you to be before the court today. As you spend the rest of your life in the Department of Corrections, I imagine that you're going to have interactions with many young women coming into prison, women who are lost, women who are broken, women who are scared. You're going to have to make a decision if you're going to have any meaning in your life going forward on who the person you want to be to those people you interact with. You will have an opportunity to take these hard lessons and perhaps convey some knowledge and perhaps present some comfort to the many people that I imagine that you'll interact with over the years. And you're going to have an influence on them, and that influence is either going to be positive or negative. If you're going to find any peace with your existence going forward, I hope that you give that some consideration. I hope you consider what you can do in the time that you have in the environment that you'll be in to have some sort of positive impact in this world. You will never be able to make it up to the Dickersons for the harm that you caused their son. But with time, you might be able to demonstrate to them that you should not be completely and totally defined by the most horrible choice that you've ever made in your life. I don't know what you are going to do from this point forward, but I hope that whatever your choices are going forward, that they are thoughtful choices, they're considerate choices, and I hope that you find some peace in the rest of your existence. With that, the court, regarding the charges for which the jury has reached a verdict, is going to issue the following sentence. As to count 1, murder in the first degree, the court will sentence you to serve the rest of your natural life in prison without the possibility of parole. With respect to count 2, first-degree arson, the court is going to sentence you to 32 years in the Department of Corrections. That sentence will run consecutively with count 1. With respect to count 3, tampering with a deceased human body, the court is going to sentence you to 12 years in the Department of Corrections. That count will run consecutively with the other counts. As to counts 4 and 5, the court on each count is going to sentence you to 12 years in the Department of Corrections. Counts 4 and 5 will run concurrently with each other, but consecutively with counts 1, 2, and 3. Ms. Devereaux, the state had mentioned indication of pre-sentence confinement of 1,257 days. Do you believe that is accurate? Yeah. All right. The court will note for the record that you have been in custody 1,257 days in this matter. Mr. Paralia, Mr. McCormick, I don't think you mentioned it in your sentencing argument, but does the state wish to make any record regarding restitution?
But we do, Judge. In this particular case, we're requesting $2,505.21 payable to the crime victims' compensation. We're asking for $286,527.34 to Farmers Insurance.
And let me make sure I have that last number, $286,527 and what were
34 cents.
34 cents.
So that total would be $286,000 or $286,032.55.
I'm sorry, Mr. McCormick.
I know.
want to make sure that I have this correctly because I think I heard two different amounts. So the first amount that I heard was $2,505.21. That is
Correct.
payable to crime victim compensation.
Correct.
And then the second payee was to Farmers Insurance. Was there only two payees?
Just those two.
And then can you repeat the amount for the Farmers
So-
Insurance? Because I think
Yes, that was 286,527.34.
3-4. Okay.
So the grand total would be 286,032.55.
Oh, I'm sorry. I think that's may have been where I
Right.
misunderstood you. Okay.
And we're asking that that be joint and several with the co-defendant in this case, Hosanna Varela, and that case number is 21CR2250.
2250. And Mr. McCormick, will the state be able to follow up with a written motion today?
I believe it's in the process and will be filed shortly.
All right, thank you. Ms. Devereaux, what I am going to do, I am going to conditionally order that restitution amount pending any request for a hearing by the defendant. I'll give you 30 days to file any request for a hearing if you choose to do so. It will be a condition of this sentence, Ms. Rodriguez, that you be liable for the payment of restitution in the amount of $2,505.21 payable to the Crime Victim Compensation Board and liable for restitution in the amount of $286,527.34 payable to Farmers Insurance. And I will review the motion filed by the state once that is provided to the court. Ms. Rodriguez, given your sentence, I do find that you are currently indigent and lack the current financial ability to pay some of these fees. I am going to waive any waivable costs and fees that are associated with this case. You will remain liable for any mandatory fees that I must impose, as well as the restitution judgment that I've entered today, pending any future hearings on the matter. Ms. Rodriguez, for what it's worth, I genuinely hope that you do find some peace in your existence after you leave this courtroom. I don't expect that it will happen tomorrow, and it may not happen a year from now or 10 years from now. But just as Mr. Dickerson deserved to live a life unmolested by this sort of pain and agony and hurt, we all deserve to live a life where we have some peace and some type of fulfillment in our existence. So I hope you consider that in the choices that you make after you leave this courtroom. With that, that will be the decision of the court. Mr. Pralia, is there any other record the state needs to make today?
Judge, we also will be filing a cost of prosecution. We just need to get those numbers together as well.
All right. And Ms. Devereaux, for the purposes of any future appeal, I will find that the defendant is indigent and lacking funds to pay for either counsel or any transcripts on appeal. I just ask that you follow up with any written motions you believe are necessary to document that issue. Ms. Devereaux, is there any other record the defense needs to make today? No. All right. That will be the order of the court, and the court will be in recess until 3 p.m.